I like to think I know Kung Fu movies, but Justin actually knows like everything about them.
Well, when we do the BSV podcast, I kind of just, anytime something comes out, he just takes the lead on that, and I just sit back and let him talk. But I mean, you know it's bad. You know it's drying up when even he's not buying any of them anymore.
Right. What happened? No, I'm just kidding, folks. Justin DeClue, the regular co-host of this podcast, is on paternity leave. So welcome to the Important Cinema Club. I'm Will Sloan, and on this episode, I'm joined by a past guest. You remember him from the classic Vanderpump Rules episode. He's a man of refined tastes. He's the co-host of the Bay Street Video podcast, and we're thrilled to have him back. It's Mark Hanson.
Thanks, Will. Thanks. I appreciate that so much. That I really thought the Vanderpump Rules episode was going to be something that nobody was going to be interested in. So I'm very happy to hear the response was through the roof.
I was thrilled about that too. I mean, I thought the thing about the Vanderpump Rules fandom is it may be an inch wide, but it's a mile deep. And actually, it's longer than an inch wide. I mean,
it is.
We've tackled subjects so much more obscure than Vanderpump Rules. Yeah. There are so many people. What I've learned from our all male listenership is that many of them have girlfriends who made them watch Vanderpump. Well, sorry, I say made them. For 10 minutes they made them watch it, and then they just loved Vanderpump Rules from that point on.
That's the thing, though, with reality TV, you know, like whenever I bring up reality TV on the BSV podcast, Justin just looks at me blank-faced, so, you know.
I'm not sure if Justin, I mean, I preach Vanderpump Rules to people, and I sort of feel like you'll know within 10 minutes if this is for you.
Yeah.
And if you are in, like, you'll be in for life after that first 10 minutes. But you're a man of refined tastes. You know a lot about the history of cinema. And so, of course, you're on today to talk about the films of Dr. Uwe Boll.
Is he a doctor?
Doctor of literature.
He is, yeah.
Back when he was, cinema's village idiot, people were making fun of him a lot because he would pretentiously call himself Dr. Uwe Boll.
Yep. I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, when rewatching or going back into some of his interviews and stuff, he does like to bring up the fact that he is a literature scholar a lot, and that his love of film comes from a very deep intellectual place, which, I mean, I can't argue with.
Well,
really.
He's made more movies. When you look at the
body of work, I mean.
We'll definitely get to that. And I'm interested to hear about your relationship with Uwe Boll. Just a quick bit of table setting. If you were on the internet in the mid-2000s and you were a movie person, you heard about Uwe Boll. Uwe Boll is a German-born filmmaker who had two movies in the mid-2000s that became international laughingstocks. There was House of the Dead from 2004 or 5. 2003. Yeah. And then...
Well, 2005 was Alone in the Dark. It's tough because, his movies... I like to call him, during that period, the king of the first week of January, because that's when his movies would typically come out. So the release dates were hard. They might premiere at a festival or two the year before. It's hard to pin down the release dates sometimes.
I remember when House of the Dead came out and it got bad reviews, but I really remember when Alone in the Dark came out, because in that first week of January when, I can conjure the image. I was going to see movies like House of Sand and Fog, whatever else was an Oscar contender that year.
Yeah, like The Spillover, right?
Yeah, like The Station Agent.
Yep.
I don't know, stuff like that. Here was this movie that came out. First of all, it had Christian Slater, Stephen Dorff, and Tara Reid, which was an odd cast for a wide release motion picture that year.
Yeah, all past their prime. I mean, at least for, wide release theatrical films.
And that's no knock on their talent.
No, big fan of all three of them.
Well, one of them, this movie got 1% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I was reading the art section of the newspapers at that time.
Yeah.
Everyone gave it half a star, 1 star. What is this? How did this get released? This has got to be some tax scam, which it was.
Which it is, yeah.
And then, over the coming weeks and months, you found out that these were, obviously they were video game adaptations, and there were all these fans of the video games online who hated these movies, hated Uwe Boll. They had petitions. If we get 1 million signatures, Uwe Boll says he will stop directing movies. He's the new Ed Wood. He's the worst director of all time. His notoriety peaked when, in I think 2007, he challenged several of his online critics to a boxing match.
Yep.
They all thought, oh, this is fun. And this was no joke for him.
No, he was dead serious about this because he also has boxing training.
They didn't know that.
They didn't know that, but not that he was a professional boxer. I think he was an amateur boxer at some point, though.
Yeah, but he took it seriously. He trained for this bout, and one after another, these 4 or 5 guys, he just KO'd in the first round.
Kicked the shit out of.
They were bleeding. They were crying. In one case, their mom was there comforting them.
It's not like he was even getting, like print critics at the time. Not that he would have had a harder time with them, but like these were all internet blogger type critics who, myself, maybe being like those kind of scrawny dudes, you know?
Yeah.
And
he definitely knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing.
Not that the print critics, I don't think Kenneth Turan would have beat him up either. But.
That was always my fantasy, though, is like, I wish he could have got some like real like name print critics here. No disrespect to the critics that actually showed up for that.
Which included Chris Alexander, local boy from Rue Morgue magazine and others.
Yeah.
At least 1 or 2 of them, I don't think, ever wrote about Uwe Boll. They just... No, there's one guy in particular who's just like, I've never seen his movies. I just thought this would be fun. They were just, online guys trying to get a little publicity, flattered to be noticed.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's a funny joke of like, filmmaker beats up the guys, give them bad reviews.
Yeah, right.
But on the other hand, it doesn't actually make the work any better.
No, it doesn't.
Now,
although apparently, according to some of the critics there afterwards, they all sat down, they were all invited to his place, and he took constructive criticism from all of them. And then he showed them a cut of some of his movies he was working on, and the general consensus was better. So
awfully magnanimous of him, I gotta say. So that was the height of his notoriety. He had another movie in, I think, 2006 or 7 called In the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege Tale that had Jason Statham and was probably his most expensive movie, $60 million. And since then, he's made over 30 films, most of which have been direct to video.
I think In the Name of the King was the last wide release movie I remember having, because that was another one I saw theatrically back in the day on a double bill with Atonement, I believe.
Oh, perfect.
Right? Because it was another early January release, catching up on some Oscar stuff. And how can I not go see it In the Name of the King? You come out of one theater, go right into the next.
I mean, you can't make it through life without having a few regrets. And I regret that I spent so much time like trying to be a cultured, good taste little boy. I saw Atonement, but I didn't see In the Name of the King. Can you imagine? Well, sorry, you can't imagine. I can't imagine going to see that in a theater.
I know.
With my fellow fans.
And the thing is, at the time, definitely I thought Atonement was the better film. Nowadays, I have seen In the Name of the King far more times than Atonement, and I think about it more.
Yeah, that's got to count for something.
It's got to count for something.
But Uwe Boll is still a filmmaker who I've rarely seen reclaimed.
But he never goes away, and there's a persistency to him that I think is admirable, I guess. But you're right, it's hard to mount a defense of him, partially because of his own personality, but also the films just aren't very good, like even the ones I like are not good films necessarily.
Okay, well, I came this week kind of hoping to reclaim him.
Yeah.
Hoping to find at least the poetry.
I'd like to reclaim him on some level, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, that's not to say I think he is important to cinematic history. Let's say that.
Right. Well, after preparing for this episode, I think I like him less than ever. So I'm hoping that in this discussion, we can maybe pull me out of that funk somehow. Because
it'll be hard.
I'd like to know a bit about your history with him and why you recently took up the challenge of watching almost all of his films.
Yeah, we're getting there. I mean, anybody that knows me, I've got a lot of time for filmmakers that are considered so bad they're good, or whatever, which is not a phrase I really like to use, because what's good, what's bad? Who even
if you
knows
like
anymore?
it,
If you like
bad?
it, you like it. But there are directors like a Tommy Wiseau or a Neil Breen or whatever that are not making good movies, but, have such a singular personality. Uwe Boll always fascinated me because he's not like a Tommy Wiseau or a Neil Breen where he's just independently making these movies like him and a small crew. Like, he is financing these movies. These are big productions. They're often based on intellectual property that's really popular.
But he is an outsider of a kind.
He is a huge outsider to the industry, even though he's managed to get these films released in thousands of theaters, or did at one point. He was always an outsider to the system, and that's always fascinated me. But when I was a kid, I just wanted to see his movies because I thought they looked cool.
Right.
I was a teenager.
So House of the Dead, Alone in the Dark came out, and you
yeah,
thought...
like House of the Dead was the first movie of his I was aware of, because that was his breakout. I guess, yeah, you want to call it his breakout film.
Yeah.
He did make a few American films before then, did some German stuff before then, but nobody knew who he was till House of the Dead came out. And I just remember thinking it looked cool. They had that great poster where it was like a keyhole with this like red demon face looking through it. And I loved horror movies. I've always loved horror movies. And at that point, like any new horror movie that was coming out, I was gonna go see. And I just remember being taken by those posters, not even knowing who made it. I wasn't even a huge fan of the game. I'd played it a bit. It was like an arcade game, but I wasn't like an aficionado of it. I just thought it looked cool. Definitely wasn't the movie I was expecting when I saw it.
Thumbs up or thumbs down at the time?
At the time, I didn't like it. I thought it was bad. I thought it was kind of boring. And yet, when Alone in the Dark came out, I mean, I looked at that cast. I was a big Christian Slater fan.
Did you realize it was the same guy who did House of the Dead?
I did. So at this point, I knew, because I feel like he was being talked about when House of the Dead came out, because even that had ridiculously low Rotten Tomatoes scores, and everybody was making fun of that. And you could tell right away with his movies that, like, it does feel like some sort of con or some kind of like tax, thing.
Yeah,
this looks noticeably cheaper. Like, it's not like a homemade movie, but it's not a lot of the other movies that are filling up these multiplexes alongside of it, right?
Totally. I mean, Alone in the Dark, when it came out, it just carried this air of there's got to be a catch here.
Yeah, right.
There's not. The profit does not depend on this release.
Yeah,
is it money laundering? Right? What is it?
And especially, like, a lot of his films are set in, like, exotic locales. And it's usually just, like, Vancouver or, like, the woods of Vancouver or something. And noticeably that. Like, I remember House of the Dead was supposed to be some island in the Caribbean. It just looks like BC. Alone in the Dark, it screams cheapo CanCon production. And yet somehow he lifted these things into North American screens all over the land, all over the U.S.
Right. And that era of his career, I mean, they were German co-productions. And one of the reasons why they were possible, and he got so criticized for this, was they were funded thanks to a loophole in the German tax law where if you invested money in the production, you could get half of it back as a tax return.
Exactly, which is why everybody ragged on him too at first. I mean, we shouldn't forget Canada's role, our home and native land. And
I mean, we have a proud history of tax shelter cinema, some of which is excellent.
Yeah, we have facilitated Dr. Boll's career pretty much in its entirety.
I mean, Brendan Fletcher from Terry Gilliam's Tideland is kind of
a regular,
his tenured leading man at this point.
Yeah, and there's a bunch more, like Michael Eklund is kind of a familiar face in CanCon, who is in tons of Boll movies. He does have like a big, apart from the bigger stars, the name stars that you know, he's got this like crew of Canadians that love working with him. Will Sanderson is another guy who shows up in like all of his movies and didn't really do anything else. Like, he just had all these people that really wanted to work with him.
Some people do want to work with him.
Yeah.
Although it should also be noted that there has been reporting of the bad conditions on his sets.
Yeah.
Like, there was an article a year or two ago about all the bad safety violations on the set of one of his recent films.
Well, he came back. So he's been kind of absent recently, and he's finally got a new movie out, which was actually shot in the U.S. It's set in the U.S. I think it might be the first movie he's actually shot entirely in the U.S. Everything before was shot in Canada or somewhere in Europe.
That's interesting, given how many of his movies deal with America and her problems.
Exactly.
He's like Lars von Trier in that sense.
He really is. But every one I watch, I'm like, yep, shot in Vancouver, shot in Vancouver, shot in Vancouver. Well, even something like Assault on Wall Street, shot in Vancouver.
If I were to make a case for Uwe Boll, like a case for him, I think it would reside in that, like, is there a catch to this guy mystery? It's interesting to think about the circumstances that led to those movies coming out and getting wide releases, being made in the first place. And then in the years since, for one reason or another, obviously he took the criticism very badly. In many interviews, he's talked about, well, actually, I'm actually really smart and I love movies. And I grew up studying and loving movies. I saw every Godard film, every Truffaut film, every Hollywood classic. So don't say I don't know movies. Well, in the years since then, he's had this Soderberghian, like, one for them, one for me streak of like he'll make Blubberella or he'll make Blood Rain 3, The Third Reich, which is set in Nazi Germany. And then on the weekends of the off hours, he'll make his Auschwitz movie.
Yeah.
His very serious Auschwitz movie. And the last time I really gave him due consideration was about 10 years ago. I heard Boll on the Projection Booth podcast, and they're the only ones I've known who have ever tried to reclaim him, try to make a case for him. And they did an episode on his Auschwitz movie.
Okay.
Which, when the trailer for that one dropped, people were not happy.
Yeah.
And his stated intention was, all this Hollywood bullshit, this Schindler's List stuff, it doesn't do justice to, I'm going to make a movie, in the tradition of Alain René's Night and Fog, that does justice to the true horrors of the concentration camps. And there was this trailer that came out of like, he's one of the guards, and the thudding music is playing, dun, dun, and like he's in front of the gas chamber and people are like banging on the windows. And everybody saw this. It was like, this is horrible. But on this podcast, they interviewed him and he swore that he was serious about this. And he was like, as a German, it's my responsibility to tell this history. So a friend and I got together and had an afternoon where we did a serious Uwe Boll double feature.
Okay,
we watched Auschwitz, then we watched Assault on Wall Street.
Okay.
And they were both terrible. And I thought, okay, I think I can close the book on Uwe Boll for now. But a movie like Auschwitz, he claimed, this is so serious. We're not caught up in this Hollywood drama. We're showing the camps as they are. But the whole movie is the shower scene from Schindler's List.
Exactly. And that's kind of his MO with his serious films. His famous quote was that he was sick of all that George Clooney social critic bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
Which, what does that mean?
How dare you? I don't want to fight for George Clooney, but it's like...
No, I know. I hate George Clooney.
Yeah, he fucking sucks. But I've seen your movies, Dr. Boll.
But you're right. In theory, I can get behind a filmmaker wanting to show something in an unvarnished, brutal kind of... to really get at the horror of the Holocaust or the Darfur genocide or something like that. But you're right, he just focuses on the one most horrific thing he can in the most exploitative kind of way possible, which is fine, if you're making pure exploitation. Lots of people have done that, but then tries to pass it off like this higher-minded kind of cinematic exercise.
Totally. Well, the Auschwitz movie, which I did not revisit for this episode.
Yeah, me neither.
It's barely 70 minutes long. The first half of it is just like a reenactment of leading the prisoners to the gas chamber and killing them. It's just that.
Yeah.
And he does it like the shower scene in Schindler's List, where it has all this like suspense.
Yeah.
All the Hollywood shit he claims to abhor is in that scene, but also none of the Hollywood niceties. There's no story. There's no characters. There's no context. There's nothing you would learn from this. And the second half is him interviewing various German school children who are ignorant about what had happened to give this lesson of like, why aren't we teaching the kids the truth in our schools? Or what? And it's like, okay, thanks for wasting my time with this, like, this ignorant testimony from kids.
Yeah, exactly.
From fucking kids.
That's the thing with him, though, whether it's a serious movie or not a serious movie, or just more of like a tossed-off action movie, he is always ripping off something directly. Like, watching these movies, you can just pinpoint things like, oh, I've seen that in that movie that came out like a year or two before this movie came out or something, Okay, well, let's talk about, and we're just going all over the place. Yeah, that's fine. That's kind of how I've been doing Boll over the last year, all over the place.
So let's talk about Attack on Darfur.
Yeah. So that was the serious one we decided to revisit, the serious quotations.
Which I've had on DVD for over 10 years. I got it in a grocery store for $2, and I got it because on the back, there's a quote that says, a tragic story that is certainly, quote, must viewing, unquote, says Academy Award-winning director Ron Howard.
Yeah, not even must-see viewing, must viewing.
Grammatically.
Have you ever heard anybody say must viewing? Like, there's no way Ron Howard sat down and wrote must viewing.
I mean, he might have. He might have just been tossing off an email or a text really quickly. And this is not the only Uwe Boll movie that has a Ron Howard quote on the box.
No, Heart of America, his early Columbine exploitation film, another serious message movie, has a quote from Ron saying, ... a very sobering, thought-provoking film.
I love that it starts with the ...
Yeah, so what did he say before that?
Yeah, all things considered, given its many limitations.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to consider is that Clint Howard is one of Uwe Boll's regular stars. I'm guessing that's where the connection comes from. But Clint Howard's in a lot of movies, and I don't see Ron Howard quotes on the back of all those.
Yeah,
so...
well, probably Clint sent these ones to his brother and was like, I get to do some real acting in this one. Like I know it's bad.
He's not even in Darfur, though, so what gives on that?
Uwe had Ron's email, and he was like, okay, well, this is the Darfur one. I'm gonna ask for the favor on this one.
One quick side note to note, just because you were saying you picked this up in like a grocery store DVD bin or whatever. One reason I think he got so big, and I only learned this from listening to the Blood Rain commentary, is the DVD business was so booming at that time that he made money off of all these. So tons of people were buying these out of grocery store bins, and enough to justify him being able to raise more money for more projects. And it's crazy because most of these DVDs are out of print right now, but these were everywhere.
Yeah, they were.
2003 to like 2015 era, they were everywhere.
And I've got Alone in the Dark on DVD. It's got commentary, it's got documentaries.
Great release.
Yeah, it's a fantastic release. It's got an interview with Christian Slater where he seems in pretty good spirits, and he's like, we're making a horror movie. What could be better? Actually, one more further side note. Boll, in all his interviews, like, he's the king of sour grapes. He's always going like, well, these Michael Bay Hollywood idiots, this Eli Roth, he makes the same shitty movie over and over. Tarantino, he's got no talent. Okay, but you got Ron Howard on your boxes,
I know.
who is Mr. Hollywood. He's the king of the establishment, and he's not as good as any of those guys. So
exactly, right?
So, like, fuck you. Like,
I mean, his long-standing feud with Michael Bay was particularly funny because Bay would keep responding to it, right? People like Spielberg, Tarantino, they're not going to respond to like an Uwe Boll call out, but Michael Bay, oh, he'll respond.
I can't believe Michael Bay responded. In fact,
twice, 2 separate times.
Do you remember that Uwe Boll announced a boxing match with Michael Bay?
Yep.
He had a whole date. He had a whole commercial that he did.
That's what I would have liked to see. That is two titans really getting in the ring together. I would have paid money to go see that.
And I also just want to say, Michael Bay is a more original filmmaker. He's a better filmmaker. He has a more distinct vision.
I'm not even like a crazy Michael Bay fanboy, but I mean, like he's actually an accomplished filmmaker.
But getting back to Attack on Darfur, and I came here to praise Boll, not to bury him, but
that's okay.
Obviously, that's not going too well.
Many have buried Boll, and many will continue to bury Boll. So
what you were saying about how all these movies just feel like they're pieced together out of whatever was popular or whatever was in the air. This is Exhibit A, where I can't point to exactly what it's ripping off, but I've seen every scene in this movie so many times. You've got this crew of journalists, Western journalists, who are in Darfur. It's Billy Zane. It's Edward Furlong. Edward Furlong playing the photographer who's got the long stringy hair that he's constantly tussling.
He's not looking good, around this period.
Christina Loken, the Terminator.
Rain herself.
Yeah.
Or the Terminator,
she's the Dietrich to his von Sternberg.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're in Darfur, and they could be anywhere in Africa, as far as I'm concerned.
They are in outside Cape Town, apparently, in South Africa.
And go into villages, and they're talking to the kind, simplistic natives who live there. Yeah. And they're hearing about the rapes and the tortures, and they're taking their pictures, and they're like, boy, we really need to bring attention to this. Yeah. And throughout all this, in the background, you're hearing like,
the music it's like that vaguely exotic sounding foreign music that they always use in Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
That never lets up. I feel like it was like wall to wall music like that.
And I've seen the way that these actors are performing, the way that these interactions are going. This is every movie about like a journalist in a war zone.
Yeah. Which was kind of popular around that time in like Oscar bait type films, I think, you know?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Hotel Rwanda.
Even something like Blood Diamond, which is like not a similar type movie. It feels like he's very in tune with what's coming, as much as he, you know, claims to not want any part of it. I mean, the year before he made this, he was like attacking Clooney for like all of his social critic bullshit, one of which was bringing attention to Darfur. So it's like, is this a troll movie, or do you just have it's just cognitive dissonance?
You know, I think he's a very emotional man, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. And one of the things that he was trying to do to get respect, which is what he really wanted, was like, okay, well, I can do a social critic movie. I can do a,
Yeah.
I care about things. I care about Darfur.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm going to do it. And I'm actually going to, unlike George Clooney, I'm going to show the truth about
Exactly.
Darfur.
And it's similar to Auschwitz in that respect, in that like there's not really much that happens in this movie other than like the first half, the journalists are there asking some questions, and the second half, massacre.
Yeah,
and
just
that's it.
slaughter.
Like, that's the whole movie.
And there are some theoretically very unpleasant things in this movie, like a baby getting impaled, but none of it got under my skin at all. It was like water off a duck's back for me.
You can't even really see much of it because of the shaky cam aesthetic, which sort of just, you can't really see much that's going on. It's just the idea of...
That's actually another thing I hate about this movie, where like he internalized the idea that like, oh, well, seriousness equals shaky cam,
yeah.
equals documentary style aesthetics. And it's just arbitrarily deployed. There's no, I don't know where he shot this. Sure, it wasn't Darfur.
It was South Africa.
Of course.
He shot a few movies in South Africa around this time.
It's got no texture at all. And the villains in this movie, you know, the evil Arabs, who they're like in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or something. They're the most cartoon, villainous, sadistic, evil. And like, if you knew nothing about Darfur going in, you would know nothing coming out of it. No, there's no context. There's no, why are they doing this? Because they're evil. And they know they're evil, and they are happy to be evil.
Yeah,
that's
they're
the
just
takeaway.
Evil Arabs killing black people. It's a racial thing. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no nuance to it.
Yeah, and so it's like, if I'm not learning anything from this and there's no call to action, then what are we doing here?
Although, you know, he tries for the call to action because he always puts the opening and closing text codas about the facts that he's Wikipedia'd about genocide in general. Some, like, I'm pretty sure this had some quote about, like, something about, like, we are doomed to repeat our mistakes sort of thing,
yeah,
you know?
sure.
Like, he always puts that stuff in.
We've allowed this to happen,
Yeah.
and we've never learned from history. You'll never believe, by the way, where he stands on the issue of the Gaza war.
That's the thing. And you really can see, I mean, again, I don't know if he cares about anything really, but, you know, his portrayal of Arabs in this movie kind of syncs up with his thoughts on people in the Middle East nowadays.
Yeah.
Not that he's even conscious of that, but...
Yeah, and I mean, the lack of curiosity about what is the context that led to this bespeaks somebody who, like, for all his gesturing towards, you know, wanting to explore the issues and such.
Well, he claims to really care about genocide in general. And it's like, I don't know about that. Not recently, at least.
That question of like, okay, is this all a con? Is he really serious and stuff? Like, he's doing this serious social issue movie that has a quote from Ron Howard on the back. But also there's the question of, well, is this just the grand tradition of an exploitation guy who does a rip from the headlines exploitation film?
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
And, you know, to be fair to him, that's the world that he's in. You know, that's how he knows how to get movies made. And so maybe, you know, maybe if we take him at his word, this is him saying, okay, well, I'm going to take this form and it is an exploitation film, but with something serious on its mind.
And that's the thing. I'm willing to, I think there is something valuable to using exploitation techniques to investigate real life things. I do think there is value in that. So yeah, if you want to, the charitable reading would be, that's what he's doing.
The most vivid movie ever made about slavery is Goodbye, Uncle Tom.
Exactly, right?
And, you know, there are many flaws in Goodbye, Uncle Tom. But, like, the fact of the matter is, there's something about the urgency of that movie. I think Tarantino kind of got this with Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Where it's like there's something about the urgency of that style, those tropes, those aesthetics that cut through, you know, the historical haze. And, I mean, all I could say is Uwe Boll is Uwe Boll.
I would say maybe if his exploitation instincts were a little more entertaining, just better, you know? It's just like you can't even really enjoy it as a pure exploitation film just because it's bad and boring a lot of the time, you know?
Well, let's talk about another serious Boll film, and this predates his dynamic duo of House of the Dead and Alone in the Dark. In 2002, after making German films, including German Fried Movie, which is one I'm very intrigued by.
Yeah, which was he was making a handful of films in Germany in the 90s, all of which are collected on a pretty nice DVD set that unfortunately doesn't have any English subtitles, so I couldn't watch any of them or couldn't understand any of them. I did throw on German Fried Movie, which is his version of Kentucky Fried Movie and is essentially just a series of lame-looking skits with the, wraparound thing of a guy just watching TV. At one point, the guy is watching something titillating and starts to jerk off, and so that's kind of the comedy you're going for here.
Yeah. Well, in 2002, he came to America and made a film about the sick soul of America.
Yep.
He made a film inspired by the Columbine shooting. It came out a year before Gus Van Sant's Elephant.
Yes.
Which I couldn't believe. I was checking the dates. I was like, surely he was ripping Van Sant off. But no.
No. But there was a big wave of Columbine exploitation, as I like to call it, that did happen in 2002, before Elephant, actually.
It was the same year as Bowling for Columbine.
Yeah, the same with that. But there were a few other straight-to-video American films that did basically the same thing as this. For me, I think Elephant was the first one I saw of that kind of wave, so I always just thought it was like kind of the first movie to deal with Columbine that wasn't like a documentary or something. But he was just kind of, again, going with the wave.
And like Elephant, it takes a holistic view of the massacre. It's set on the day, and you follow many different vignettes, many different tragic stories of how hard it is to be a teenager or to be around teenagers in white picket fence America.
Which is Vancouver. No.
Yeah. There's a teenage pregnancy. That's the pregnant girl is played by Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah, early role for her. She doesn't even get her name on the front cover here on this DVD.
Although I think that's changed with subsequent releases.
Yeah, well, they did re-release it. Olive Films put it out and just put Elizabeth Moss's face on the front of it.
There's also, a troubled young girl who smokes crack. Some of the crack smoking scenes in this movie. Boll tries to bring his style to these scenes. And like every bad filmmaker who tries to do like a drug trip in film, even some good ones. Yeah, this foils most of them. God, what else? There's
obviously the Eric Harris, Dylan Klebold stand-ins who look exactly like those guys. Like they're outfitted to look just like the Columbine shooters. And then you have their bullies played by Brendan Fletcher, one of them, Will Sanderson, another Boll regular, and a bunch of other typical Y2K era looking bullies that, have their own issues. It's funny, the Brendan Fletcher character has like a crisis of conscience right before everything goes down too. He's like a total piece of shit, and then he like hears about his friend like gang raping somebody, and he's like, oh, that's too far, man.
Yeah. And there's a flashback scene where the Dylan and Eric characters are like walking past the bullies, and then they get tortured, like brutalized, Sallow style, basically, by these bullies, where they're like making them eat dog shit. They
kind of remind me of the Step Brothers scene though too, where they're being forced to like lick the dogs.
Yeah. And Boll thinks that this is the dramatic high point of the movie.
Hard.
He is laying on the music. Everything that Gus Van Sant did right in Elephant, he takes the direct opposite approach. Just the most corny melodramatics. All the most cliched stock high school stuff.
But you do get some of the faculty too, which is, nice. But even that is pretty run of the mill. Michael Paré is kind of like the lead character in the fact he's a writing teacher who's lost his own mojo, I guess, and is like really grumpy about that.
And he lets it out on the students.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I thought Michael Paré was pretty good in this movie.
Yeah, me too.
Some of the other sort of name actors in the cast include, Jurgen Prochnov as the principal. There's Maeve Quinlan, who you may recall from Ken Park.
Right, yeah, I saw you mention that.
Which came out the same year, actually, and I think would make an interesting double bill with this film. There's also Clint Howard as one of the shooter's fathers.
I mean, obviously, who else are you going to get? Unless he's playing like a creepy janitor, there's like no one else you're going to get.
From the opening shot where it's like black and white surveillance footage, and it's the worst video game sound effects, like pow, pow, pow.
Yeah.
And then like the music is da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. It's like, I'm sorry, you're not a serious filmmaker.
I know. He really leaned on the new metal soundtracks big time in the 2000s period, whether it was, video game movie or not. This one also ends with some heavy-handed text, too, listing off all the school shootings that have happened up until the point that he made this movie, which, you know, you couldn't do today because there's just too many of them.
Yeah, and I mean, when Gus Van Sant made Elephant, the movie doesn't have a clear thesis. Purposely, one of its theses is that there is no thesis.
Exactly,
It's like this is just the environment, and he didn't want to give clear answers. Somebody like Michael Moore, when he made his movie, you know, he basically called for certain restrictions on bullet sales and gun sales, and also pointed a finger at the NRA as a villain. And with this movie, you get a big portrait of America and her problems with, like, it's the parents, it's, there's teenage pregnancy for some reason. There's drugs, none of which is directly affecting the boys.
No.
And then it ends with, in America, there are 100 trillion school shootings every day. Kids have a 150% chance of being shot. It's like, okay, well, that's what this is about. Like, then how did all that stuff have anything to do with this?
Yeah, it doesn't really address, like, gun control or anything either.
Yeah.
But, like, that's not a thing. Like, I remember, you know, Elephant has scenes where it shows how easy it is for them to get weapons, right? They just, like, order them online and then they arrive and they get nothing like that here that I recall.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, like...
It's just like, America... Huh?
Yeah.
Fucked up.
And get a load
what
of
are you
these
gonna do?
Get a load of these statistics. And you know, doesn't it really make you think?
It was funny to me when he throws in, like, amongst all the other school shootings at the end, an incident where a teenager stole a small Cessna plane and crashed it into a Bank of America tower, which is, you know, a troubled teen incident, but it's like not really directly related to school shooting. So it's just like grasping at straws for like any sort of statistic he can put in here.
Yeah. So who do you think is most responsible? Is it the drugs? Is it the unwed pregnancy? Or is it disgruntled writer's craft teachers?
I know, right? It's hard to say. A combination of all the above, I guess.
Well, I guess it's society.
It's society in general. I mean, the film is called Heart of America, I guess, for a reason. What's really funny to me, though, is it's like, beyond all that, he's still got his like exploitation narrative sort of instincts sharp by throwing in like a last minute twist at the end, which is really funny because, I mean, obviously it sets it up as like, these are the Columbine killers. They look exactly like the Columbine guys. And then the twist at the end is, oh no, one of them's not actually the killer. It's the crack smoking girl. She's the killer. I mean, it got me. I didn't see that coming.
No,
I was going with it.
I guess it just goes to show it's never who you think.
It's never who you think.
There's at least one more Boll film that we should talk about, which is his cri de coeur, his 2008 release, Postal.
Yeah.
And I think this is the one that if you talk to any cinephile, this is the one that, to say it has a reputation is maybe overstating it, but if you go on Letterboxd, this is the one that has the most logs.
Yeah.
I don't think it's his most seen movie, but it's the one that cinephiles will occasionally look at and be like, is there something here?
That's the thing. If you're trying to find like, what is at the heart of this Boll guy, with the video game movies, you can just write it off as he's just making a video game adaptation, just making money. But this was a very personal project, even if it is based on a video game still, which is kind of what I like with his stuff. He would take the IP and then do something like totally on his own with it.
It's sort of self-reflexive, obviously, the way he uses the video game, because at this point, this is after the boxing match. This is after the petition. You know, he's public enemy number one. And this is him saying, okay, well, now I'm going to tear it all down. I'm going to take this video game and I'm going to make a point about how video game movies are stupid by doing this.
Exactly. Even though, that's how I've made all of my money.
This was him partly trying to reinvent himself, partly trying to be taken seriously. It's like, I'm not just the hack who makes video game movies. I can also make a movie that deals in issues. I can make a movie that takes a big swing, tries things. It's dealing in comedy. 2008, it's that perfect moment to come out of like Borat and South Park, equal opportunity offender, boundary pushing, edgelord stuff. And what everybody remembers about this movie, if they do remember it, is the opening scene.
Yeah, that is probably one of the most iconic moments in any of his films.
And some would say that the opening scene, which involves two of the 9/11 hijackers, and I'm laughing just thinking about it. I got to give it to Boll. This opening scene ends with a punchline that has made me laugh.
Yeah, you know what? I remember sitting slack-jawed when I first saw this film back in the day.
And some people would say, well, this is why he couldn't get it released theatrically. He self-distributed this movie. He tried to get a 2,000 screen release. He ended up releasing it on 6 screens in all of North America.
He tried. I remember he did have some some supporters. I know the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal was a big supporter of his work around this time. I believe they screened In the Name of the King before it came out, and they did screen this, and I think he was trying to use that to leverage more like cult appeal and get more screens. But yeah, nobody would touch this.
You know, you're a theater owner and you're like, okay, well, I have this opening scene that is potentially really toxic. I've got a movie where it's like George W. Bush and Osama bin Laden are like holding hands and skipping through a field. And on the other hand, it's not distributed by a major studio. The biggest star is Dave Foley.
I know.
Like, I'm sorry, like, what's in it for them?
I'm not shocked at all, especially since, you know, none of his wide theatrical films were really making any money at that point. I think In the Name of the King sort of cleared a lot of his finances out too, because he put that out himself wide with some other help.
And In the Name of the King, I'm sure, did very well on home video.
It did, yeah. Definitely. He released a 2-disc special edition, an extended cut, like another loaded DVD edition that, you know, you don't really see these days.
Now, with Postal, he throws a lot of stuff at the wall in this movie, some of which sticks. Not a lot.
Not a lot, yeah.
But a couple things here and there. I mean, I saw this movie when it was new. I didn't see it when it played at the Rainbow Market Square.
Right, yeah.
We had one of the 6 screens in the city.
I know we did. I regret I didn't see it theatrically either. So
I wish I did.
I didn't do my, you know, diligence.
Instead, I saw it in my dorm room on my laptop, probably the next year. And the things that I remembered from then were still the highlights for me on this viewing. Yeah. It's the opening scene. It's Dave Foley showing his cock.
Yep.
It's Vern Troyer being raped by the monkeys.
Yep.
Which I don't find that funny, but it's like, it's memorable.
Yeah, the fact that he did it, you know, counts for something.
And Uwe Boll's cameo where he plays himself and he basically says, you know, people say that my movies are funded with Nazi gold, and it's true. It's true.
And then he gets shot in the dick and says, I hate video games.
Right, which, you know, a bit of a non sequitur.
Yeah, you know, and then it just on to the next scene.
Like Southland Tales, it's just this like vague assemblage of stuff that's in the air at the time, some of which is very dated, some of which feels oddly prescient. It's an angry white man movie. You know, the main character, he gets laughed at in his job interview. He lives in a trailer park where his 400-pound wife is cheating on him just in front of him, angry at everything. And so he picks up a gun and starts killing everyone.
Yeah.
And he hooks up with Dave Foley, who plays this cult leader. Oh, there's another cast member who I actually like, J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, J.K. Simmons shows up in this. That was a surprise when I was revisiting it.
Who plays this like right-wing politician who's, you know, has a soapbox and he's like saying these ridiculous things. I think he's very funny in this movie.
Yeah, he's not bad. Real talent there.
So the movie, like, if I'm rating on the Boll curve, this has at least a few things I think are funny. It has a general originality to it. It has ambition. All that adds up to 2 stars in my book. But, you know, on the Boll curve, that's like 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, he really went all out for this one. I mean, he put... I feel you can tell he put everything he had going on upstairs into this one. I have to confess that this is one of my lesser favorite ones.
Hey,
I'm
fine.
Not,
I'm
gonna have a hot take on Postal. I don't think it's that good. And maybe it's just a personal thing. I really find
you don't have to apologize. It's a bad movie.
I really find purposeful comedies that are bad insufferable. You know.
Well, I think the second half of this becomes a real chore.
It does. Yeah. I think the problem with this is he really just blows his load too fast. The opening scene to me is the best scene, and I don't know where you go from there. You know.
Yeah, and there's a toxicity in his worldview.
Yeah.
You know, this movie, Assaults on Wall Street, all these movies, there are other ones as well where it's kind of like the angry white man protagonist who like picks up a gun and kills everyone.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. That is like a major theme throughout all of his films, comedy or serious films. It's the white male aggression and the picking up a gun and the mass shooting. That is the big thing. Assault on Wall Street. He also had the Rampage trilogy, which was just that. It's just basically like an incel going on a shooting rampage. And they all conclude, well, the serious ones at least, with the rampager, so to speak, getting away with it, framing somebody else, and then getting away with it and kind of being shown in a light like, you know, it's bad what they did, but there are a lot of reasons, like valid reasons that they did what they did.
Right,
you know?
which is not the same as Taxi Driver.
No.
You know? And that coupled with like the streak of misogyny and racism in these films.
Yeah, that's the thing. Postal is very misogynistic and racist and ableist, homophobic, you know, take your pick. Again, it's an equal opportunity offender, so that kind of comes with the territory. But then you see some of his other stuff, and it's like, you know, I can, again, charitable reads. He's got something about how people feel disenfranchised in America and can lead them to do horrible things, which is something I can relate to, you know?
I mean, Assault on Wall Street,
like, yeah, like he's against the banks and I can get behind that.
The politics of Assault on Wall Street are not terribly objectionable to me.
No, I agree. And I did revisit that one and I'm like, you know what? It's stupid.
It's a bad movie in a lot of ways.
But I can get behind this. You know, the bankers, the government officials, the cops, they're all, well, not even the cops. The cops are portrayed as kind of like the working class. So it's kind of just like the bankers and the government are all portrayed as bad. And I'm like, yeah, totally. 2008 stock market crash. I mean, the degrees he goes to show that pain is pretty hilarious, with Dominic Purcell's wife like slitting her wrists because like he can't afford her cancer treatments anymore or whatever, and just like really pushing him to the edge. You know, I can get behind. But then you see something like Rampage, where it's like the main character, Brendan Fletcher, again, his grievances are like the local coffee shop won't make his like caramel macchiato the right way with enough foam, you know? Right. So it's
like Falling Down.
It's like Falling Down. That. Yeah, Rampage is more like Falling Down, but it has that serious veneer like, oh, look at like what white men are doing because we're just not giving them a chance in this day and age.
Right.
But it's like the actual grievances are pretty hilarious.
It's like, yeah, what if Falling Down was really badly made? Or
yeah, exactly. He loves Falling Down.
Or what if Taxi Driver came to the conclusion that like, you know, you got to hand it to Travis. He's got a point. That guy at the bodega that he shot probably deserved to die.
Yeah. And in a Boll movie, they all walk off into the sunset at the end.
Yeah.
In a way that positions them as, no, these are the heroes. Yeah, okay. But this guy also killed a lot of innocent, like Assault on Wall Street. Like, yeah, he kills like the evil banker, like the CEOs and stuff. But he also just kills some like 9-to-5 office drones. And like, I don't know about that.
We can wrap this up by talking just briefly about this documentary called Raging Boll that you can watch on YouTube right now. It's a feature-length documentary from 2010 that chronicles the In the Name of the King postal period. It centers on the boxing match.
Yeah.
And that's really funny stuff, I think.
That's the selling point. I mean, that was kind of the reason it was made, I guess. I mean, it's called Raging Boll for a reason. I mean, he's just wailing on these guys, and then there's footage of them after. Like, that one guy's, like, puking his guts out on the street.
There's one guy who's like, I didn't even really have an opinion on Uwe Boll before this, but now I hate him. It's like, well, sorry, you should have read the fine print.
Yeah, you should have prepared. Apparently, he gave you guys 3 months to prepare, so, although that's debated.
Sorry, I think he's got you dead to rights. Right? Again, it doesn't make him a better filmmaker. No. Maybe it was childish of him, but you're the author of your own misfortune here. Most of the movie is built around interviews of Dr. Boll,
where he, you know, again, talks about his intellectual background, his, you know, schooling, his love of movies, his distaste with Hollywood products.
Yeah, and one can have some empathy for him here, because one message that comes across overwhelmingly is these idiots on the internet who make fun of me, they don't understand that I'm an independent, I'm struggling, I'm outside the system. Why can't they respect that? Why don't they pick on somebody like Michael Bay? Which I can sympathize with that. On the other hand, he wants to be an insider so much.
That's the thing. It's like, yeah, I think it is really valuable to note that he is an outsider. And especially watching this documentary, because before they get to the fights, you see him hustling, going from studio to studio in Hollywood, driving around with this like fine cut of In the Name of the King, trying to get studios interested in distribution.
And you know,
He's doing it.
Sony comes to his screening at the American film market, and they're like, yeah, we'll buy it. We'll give you like a wide release on 100 screens minimum. And he's like, no, I can get better than that. And he ends up self-distributing it. Doesn't do well in theaters.
It doesn't do too well.
I think he should have taken the Sony deal.
Probably.
But whatever.
But, you know, and Sony ended up distributing it on DVD anyway, so you should have just gone with that. But I find it inspiring, despite everything, how much he hustles to try and be a part of the system, but in his own way. Like, yeah, he wants to be an insider, but he also clearly wants to make his own movies. And that's not going to get him to where he wants to be. It's not going to make him a Michael Bay or something. But I find that struggle fascinating.
And so I can empathize with Postal as this acting out.
Yeah.
This like, okay, the system doesn't want me. The critics don't want me. The fucking fanboys on the internet don't want me. Well, I'm going to make this horrible, hideous, unreleasable just wail, and I'm going to put it out myself. So I can sort of respect that.
I know. I mean, the saddest thing about it is when you make a movie this designed to provoke and then like nobody goes to see it.
That
was always what I found really sad about this movie, is that clearly he wants to make people mad, just to like, he wants to like just cause a stir. And I don't think it was causing a stir because nobody saw it, right? Unless you were like in tune with Uwe Boll at the time.
Yeah, and I think most people who heard about it sort of greeted it the way that you would greet a dead baby joke.
Yeah,
where it's
exactly.
like, oh, okay, that's over there. That's edgelord stuff.
The same year or year before An American Carol did, which I feel like it has some similarities to. It's been a while since I've sat down and watched An American Carol, but I feel like there are some similarities there. But this goes harder, I would say.
It does.
An American Carol got a wider release. So.
I think I like Postal better, even though
me
I would
too.
say An American Carol is the more professional product.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one that's easier to sell to like a wider distribution, despite its, potentially offensive leanings.
One more thing I'll say about the Raging Bull documentary is he makes a case for himself of these fanboys on the internet. They think I don't know movies. They think I don't love movies. They think I'm in it for the money. Nobody loves movies more than me. I've seen every Godard film, every Truffaut film. I spent my whole first 20 years just watching movies, making notes on them. I didn't have any friends. I was watching movies. I mean, that's revealing.
Yeah. No, I thought that was.
And I mean, all you can say to that is, I believe you, but you made Alone in the Dark. There's a sort of lesson here that, obviously there are so many filmmakers, most filmmakers who have all these advantages. We talk about Nepo babies, we talk about privilege and all this, and all that's true.
Yep.
But also a certain amount of meritocracy enters into it. Like you can't have a successful movie without the audience buying into it at some point. Or some, if not the audience, some critical mass of people. Some influencer, somebody, some zeitgeist has to hit you. And a lot of that is your own talent. And at the end of the day, sorry, Uwe, I know it's not fair.
But you're just not very good. I guess with me, it's like, if I'm going to mount a defense, and maybe it's just because mainstream cinema has gotten so bad lately and so homogenized, and it all feels like it's from kind of the same corporate boardroom sort of source. That, I go back, I started this journey of revisiting his films this year. And, to his credit, he is getting boutique Blu-ray releases of these movies.
Massacre Video did a lovely job.
Yeah, both on Postal and Blood Rain. Not to say that means they're good, but, that's where we are in physical media production. But I find watching these, they might be bad, but they've got personality. And that is everything to me these days. I'm not saying rush out and watch Uwe Boll movies. I would never recommend one. And I've told, if you listen to the Bay Street Video podcast, I've told this to Justin over and over again. It's like, I'll take this over a Marvel movie any day. And, that might be a controversial hot take, but...
Well, I'd also just say, in defense of Uwe Boll, think of all those people who direct, like, the last 15 years of Steven Seagal's career.
Yeah.
Or a lot of the people who make the later Bruce Willis films that you love so much.
Another love of mine.
And we don't talk about those filmmakers, and it's not just because Uwe Boll has made a huge spectacle of himself. Mm-hmm. It's not just because of his interviews and his loudmouth behavior. A lot of it is, you look at Boll's filmography and it's like Blubberella, Blood Rain 3, The Third Reich, Auschwitz, Assault on Wall Street, Stoic.
Yeah. Oh, God, Stoic, starring a young Sam Levinson.
Yeah. The Rampage movies. Yeah, these are products of his vision.
Of his vision. And you know what? We've spent a lot of time talking about the lack of aesthetic and stuff that he has, which, I would agree with. Most of his movies look like shit. But there are still things in these movies that are very recognizably Bollian, I find, that you can pick up on. And I think that's the mark of an auteur. Is that not what an auteur is?
Well, he has preoccupations.
He does. And you know what? I gotta hand it to him. He's really open to talking about his process. He loves to talk about making all of his movies. And it's interesting how he's got such a great memory. I was revisiting Blackwoods, which was one of his early pre-House of the Dead American DTV efforts, which on the DVD comes with an intro. He always has intros on these DVDs. And he pinpointed, we shot it in this month for this many weeks. We did this and that. And this was 15 years after the fact. There's something about that transparency with the industry and the filmmaking process that, I don't know, I find endearing. And maybe just the fact that he's got such a rogues gallery of washed up Hollywood stars that just go to bat for him time and time again. I think my favorite part of the Raging Bull documentary was Michael Paré showing up at the match, encouraging him, be like in his corner, being like, yeah, beat the shit out of these guys. They're disrespectful to you.
Michael Paré, who's in all these movies.
He's probably in the most Bull movies out of any of the big stars.
And probably second only to Eric Roberts, just in terms of like the most shit.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Paré is also like a Frank D'Angelo guy too. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the fact that he was there, he could just be sleepwalking through these movies, but no, he likes Bull.
Well, that's the thing. Usually, like, I watch, a lot of DTV Drek from the, 2000s until the present. And most of these stars that show up, like a Billy Zane, Edward Furlong, Eric Roberts, Casper Van Dien, Patrick Muldoon, they show up, they do their thing. You just get that it's like they're in and out and it's fine. And for some reason, maybe I'm wrong, I feel like the people making these movies, with some exceptions. I mean, I think Michael Madsen on Blood Rain is, drunk the whole time.
Yeah, I don't think Geraldine Chaplin knew where she was.
There's certain, but his like main core, the guys that keep coming back again and again, I do think they like working with him, and I don't know what exactly it is. Maybe there's like an efficiency to the productions or what have you. Maybe they're just getting paid really well compared to other DTV stuff because of his tax loopholes and everything. But I always get the sense, and a little bit more from that Raging Bull doc, because you hear from some of these actors that they kind of like the guy.
Well, maybe one last semi-nice thing I'll say about him is, to that question of, is he for real? What's the catch here? Is he just a con artist? He really does seem to believe in himself and in his career.
I mean, that's everything.
And so, like, is his Auschwitz movie, is Attack on Darfur, are they cynical exploitation films? At the end of the day, like, he's convinced himself that they're not.
Right.
So,
and I mean, what are you going to do? Like, the guy has made 30 more movies now. He's still making movies. He embodies the industry hustle to me.
One day, one of them might be good.
One of them might be good. Yeah, maybe he's got one good one in him.
And when it is, I'll be there.
No, that's the thing. I'm not going to stop. I mean, I'm taking this train all the way to the end, and he's back, baby. Like, he had a new one that just came out, which had some, problems on set with, producer bringing a loaded gun to set, stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's got another one coming out soon, though, too. Like, he's back on the American DTV market.
Well, it turns out you do have old Uwe to kick around anymore, and that's great. Well, Mark, thanks as always. Glad we could have this struggle session about Uwe Boll.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's refreshing to just, talk at length about Mr. Bull. It's hard with him because he's a complicated figure. Don't read too much about his politics, though.
I know that you are a fan of the late period Bruce Willis movies, or if not a fan, a scholar.
Yeah, it's another thing that it's like I would never recommend one of these films, and yet I feel compelled to document their existence. I'm fascinated that they exist, and I think more people should take notice of them.
Well, obviously they've had a lot of bad publicity for the fact that Bruce Willis, was suffering cognitive decline.
Yeah, claims of elder abuse are not unfounded.
Unsafe working conditions. Perhaps. But one person who shares your enthusiasm and is even more enthusiastic, it seems, is Quentin Tarantino.
I heard about this recently. Justin actually sent me this article, the second it dropped.
So,
and
this is from World of Real, my favorite news source.
Yeah, I love them.
Always breaking the scoops. Quentin Tarantino defends and praises Bruce Willis's direct-to-video movies. I was really impressed. Now, Tarantino, the king of hot takes, obviously, but when he lays down the gauntlet like this, one is compelled to consider it. He said on a recent episode of his podcast, these movies that he's been making for these companies have really gone under fire in a really big way. And there's been these kinds of expose articles written about them and talking shit about these movies. I was really impressed by Bruce in these movies. I thought he was really charming in them. He's really fun. He goes on to say, you can never have a scene where he says a line, somebody else says a line, and he says a line back. You're always getting one line out of him at a time, so there's always a cut. But he's making it work. He's not phoning in his performances. I think there might be some truth to that, just in the sense that, like, because he doesn't know where he is and because he's being told to do something, he's trying hard to do it.
Yes.
Is that acting? I don't know. Is that the craft of acting?
Yeah, I mean, we all know Tarantino's lost his damn mind at this point.
The generosity he shows for this and the lack of generosity he shows for, I don't know, Antonioni or something.
Look, I watched all these Bruce movies from beginning to end. I'm trying to put a book together on them. It's very slow going. I guess, again, if we're talking charitable readings, you could look at this in an experimental way as like, yes, it's obvious that Bruce Willis is not interacting with anybody on set, and all of his scenes are shot where he's got an earpiece in, he's being fed the lines. So yeah, I guess it's like a different sort of acting and filmmaking in general that you don't often see. The reality is they're not good though.
Yeah.
And he's not good in them. And I think you've seen a few of them. Like, he looks like he's not well in a lot of them. And the funny thing to me is, like, I would get if Tarantino picked some of the earlier ones, because Bruce is actually having a good time in some of the earlier DTV, like from 2010, 2011, 2012.
Well, he still had, still had his faculties when he was making those.
One of the first ones he did was like called Setup with 50 Cent, Ryan Phillippe, shit movie, but he's having fun. He's a crime boss in it. He's acting with everybody. He's having a time. He says jokes. Like, it's good. But Tarantino's not even picking those ones. Like, I think the three that he named, at least the article I saw, he names three.
Yeah.
Trauma Center,
Vice, and Deadlock.
Deadlock.
Which I don't know any of those.
Vice is a little older. It's a sci-fi one with Thomas Jane. Yeah, he's got, I don't think he was as bad with the dementia hadn't fully caught up with him yet. So he's got a bit more. But in that one, he just looks like he doesn't want to be there, which is how Bruce looks a lot of the time on stuff he doesn't want to do. The other ones, though, were very much in his like late stages, Deadlock and Trauma Center. Trauma Center co-stars Lala Kent from Vanderpump Rules in a small role. Trauma Center, he looks particularly unwell, though. He looks like he's maybe been drinking a little bit or something. He doesn't look great in that. Deadlock is his classic MO if he just sits in a chair the entire movie. So I don't know. I mean, I go to bat for these movies more than anybody, but even I like look at these comments. I'm like, are you okay, man? Are you okay, Quentin?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't say more than one line at a time, if you can't have a back and forth conversation, you probably can't build a performance.
That's the thing, right? It's like, I appreciate that somebody else is talking about these movies and, showing some love to them, which, I do a lot. I just feel like to single out his performances as actually being good and like, I wish we could see more of him. And he's actually really good in these movies. What are you smoking, man?
If I had to watch one late period Bruce Willis movie, what should it be?
I always recommend the Detective Knight franchise, which is a trilogy of films, kind of his Three Colors trilogy, I'd like to say, because they are all set they're all holiday themed. There's Halloween and then Christmas and then Independence Day. Those ones, he is, advanced in his dementia, unfortunately, but he has a director, which is really the only director that I think knew how to kind of deal with Bruce around this time, a guy named Edward Drake, who clearly pays homage to his earlier films. He makes sly self-referential kind of scenes and stuff, and he lets Bruce have as much fun and do as much as he can while not putting him in too many, like, I guess, embarrassing or unsafe positions like a Randall Emmett would put him in. So those movies, I would say, are a little more fun. I'm also a big fan of another one he made called Apex, which was from the latter few years. That one's mostly because Neil McDonough, though, is the villain, and I'm a big Neil McDonough fan. So Bruce, Bruce just kind of like sits in a chair or walks around in a daze through most of these movies. So it's kind of hard to recommend a specific one. But yeah, I would say the Detective Knight ones, or just go back to the beginning and watch like Setup or something, because at least you'll get like a lively Bruce Willis performance in a shitty movie.
Yeah.
So
I also recommend Die Hard.
Yeah, Die Hard. I've heard it's good.
I've
never seen it.